guys. Hi, Fuelers. I see you all coming in the space. Hey, Fuel. Welcome to today's conversation. I just gave you a sneak peek of our amazing panelists today. So excited to have this conversation. Today's Race Bridge is all about Generation Z, the 20-somethings in America, the youngest Americans. We're talking to them today about their views on race and racism and what's going on in our world today. I've never had a panel full of people that I could say, I'm old enough to be your mama. I actually can say that today. Never had that happen before. For those who don't know me, my name is Corey Jo Biddle. I'm the executive director for FUEL Milwaukee. Again, I'm excited to have you all in the space. We'll have a good turnout for today's conversation with Generation Z. So for folks that are new to FUEL events, FUEL is a community engagement organization for mostly young professionals, but the organization is 20 years old now. So our reach, when we started off, we were just 20-somethings and 30-somethings, and now we have people of all different backgrounds and colors and ages as a part of our network. About our 80% of our members are 40 and under. So a good portion of these folks on the call are going to be from the mighty millennial generation that we've all heard so much about. We've heard less about Generation Z in the workplace because they've just, the oldest of them have just graduated and been in the workforce only for a couple of years. So this will be a great opportunity for us to talk to them. I'm going to introduce the panel as we get started here. And you guys can go ahead and wave and say, you unmute when I say your name so the folks can see you as you're waving. We're going to start off with Michaela Silva. Michaela is an educator, elementary school educator with MPS. Hey, Michaela. How you doing? We got Darren.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Darren Madison Jr., who is an organizer. We've seen him in the community a lot, doing a lot of things, but he worked with Urban Underground and the National Youth Alliance for Boys and Men of Color. Hi, Darren. Yo, thanks for being here. Solana is the social media coordinator for Leaders Igniting Transformation, also known as LIT. Hey, Solana.
Hi, actually newly the intern coordinator, but.
Oh, intern coordinator, okay. Promotion, moving on up.
A little bit, yeah.
Get paid.
Madeline Larsh is a student at U of Minnesota Twin Cities. Hey, Madeline.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. Lyle is also a student at New York University. Hey, Lyle.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. Julia is a project manager at Athena Communications. Hey, Julia.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Now, I know you from, I've seen you at the Bucks game, so I know you're involved with the Bucks in some way.
I am. Yes, I'm an entertainer for the Bucks as well.
That's right. So wearing both hats. Here we go. Noah Wolf is a researcher and student at UW Milwaukee. Hey, Noah.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Okay, Rithi Punya Marthala is an educator also in Milwaukee Public Schools. I ran across her YouTube channel today where she's putting up videos for those kids, and it's highly entertaining. Thanks, you. Rithi.
Oh, Rithi Punya.
Rithi, yes, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I saw you doing the sit-ups for the kids and counting to 10. It was great.
Thank you so much. I got my workout in, got a little education going.
Very cute, very cute. So as we get started with the conversation, I want to recognize our sponsors. Our presenting sponsor is Self-Help Credit Union. If you have any questions about Self-Help Credit Union, you want to contact Pamela Bell. Her contact information is there. Now, for those of you who know where the old Legacy Bank space is, they're actually in that space. So they're a financial institution, but really have a mission and dedication towards economic freedom and opportunities for all. They offer opportunities for individuals, nonprofits, businesses. It runs the gamut. So you want to check out their website and especially reach out to Pamela if you have any questions about Self-Help Credit Union. What a great partner for us in the Race Bridge programming here. Thanks again, Pamela, for all your support, and thanks to Self-Help Credit Union. I also want to give a shout out to Radio Milwaukee 88.9, easily one of the most listenable radio stations, in my opinion. They not only have great music on the station, but the station is all about community and the community of Milwaukee. So when you go to their website, one of the pages, which I'm showing here, is Milwaukee Stories, in addition to others, which has great insight on people, places, brands, events, opportunities that make Milwaukee a distinct place in the world to live. So shout out to Radio Milwaukee as our media sponsor. Thanks to them. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so we can see our amazing panelists. I want you to see them all because this is what Generation Z looks like. I want to start off with a little bit of demographic information, but before we do that, I want to do a quick check-in with each of you. And before we do that, I'll level set for the participants, the FUEL participants in the room. Now, you know that we normally will do a hard stop right at 3 o'clock. Because of the number of panelists we have today, there's a good chance that we're going to go over a little bit. So I've already kind of prepped the panelists, and I'll do the same to you as the attendees. If we go over and you need to hop off for any reason, you have another engagement, feel free to do that. If you want to participate in any extended discussion or Q&A, just hang on with us. Does that sound good? Okay, well, let's get started. I want to do a quick check-in with all of the panelists and just find out, how are you doing right now in this time of your lives? We're seeing a lot. First, to start it off with COVID, which we've never seen before. This will be a huge marker for adulthood for your generation. And now some of the civil unrest and civic action protests around not only the Black Lives Matter movement, but racial equality and equity in general, and just what that means in our world today. How are you feeling? Are you hopeful? Are you optimistic? Are you concerned? I just want to do a quick check-in. I'm going to start with you, Lyle. Let's check in with you. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing pretty good right now. Like after COVID, I moved back from New York City back to Milwaukee for a little bit. I think I'm gonna end up staying here all fall and do online classes. And I guess to answer your question, right now I'm feeling, I think initially like when George Floyd died and I saw that, and then I just saw the huge kind of movement and like kind of awakening for a lot of people in the country on like what a lot of these deep issues are. I felt very sad at first that it had to just hold out for so long, and but right now I feel more hopeful that as more of our leaders become aware of these issues and really understand that this is important, I really hope that there will be some change, and I think that the power of our vote is going to be really important in the upcoming months, especially people our age. I guess that's all I'll say. I'll let some other people talk too.
Thanks, Lyle. How about you, Julia?
Yeah, I would say all of the above. I really have a mixed bag over here, feeling very inspired with everything that's accumulated, and but at the same time, there's definitely a level of fatigue at this point that we're still dealing with these things that we thought that we have gotten over, not like we actually got over them, but but I don't know, I feel like an immense drive or an immense fire to really put forth the change that I wish to see, and the change that I feel like so many of my peers wish to see. So I feel really hopeful in that aspect.
Hopeful is good. How about you, Madeline?
There we go. Sorry, a little technologically challenged. I'm good for the most part. Kind of the same situation as Lyle said. I was going to University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, and then everything pretty much started shutting down because of COVID, and we all got sent home. And I'll also be taking classes online this fall. Not sure if I'm going back spring semester, but I know for the fall I'll be staying in Milwaukee, taking classes through online. And I think for me, it's devastating to see how much, kind of going off of what others have said so far, like it's devastating to see how much hasn't changed. It's hard to see the posts of people who are in their 60s saying like, we're still fighting for this. Like, it's really sad that we still have to do this. But also in the same sense, optimistic, because I'm seeing so many people holding each other accountable, so much more than I saw before. Especially on social media and on platforms, people calling out each other and educating each other, just to keep each other better informed on how we can all support this movement and stuff. So cautiously optimistic, but mostly optimistic.
Thank you. Michaela, how about you?
Hi, thank you. I am inspired being a part of a group right now that wants to talk about this. Like others were saying, Madeline was just saying that I think that we're having more of these conversations that need to be had. And I appreciate that we're taking the moment to talk to younger people, including Generation Z. However, I will also say I'm extremely concerned if we're talking about Generation Z. As an educator in Milwaukee public schools, that also means my students. So I'm very concerned about how coronavirus is going to be affecting their livelihoods, not just for the next month to a year while we figure out a vaccine situation. I'm also concerned about how this is going to affect their educational and social mobility moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Tell me how to pronounce your first name again if I say it wrong. Rithini. Rithi. I kept saying it, and then.
Yeah, that's okay. I think for me, I'm in a very similar position to Michaela. Being an educator, I teach K4, so kindergarten. It's usually their first year in school. And I think when it comes to things like COVID, it started off, I think, very chaotic, especially everything being virtual. And technology is not really something we use in the classroom. Everything is very much like hands-on with like Play-Doh and crafts and art at the forefront. But I also do think that it has pushed me to be more hopeful and also really inspired by the young educators around me and how creative they've become in making solutions for their students. So I think when it comes to bigger umbrellas of these organizations, I am a little bit skeptical on how they are dealing with the situation, but I do have a lot of hope for the individual teachers and the people that are running their own classrooms and organizations in that way. So, yeah.
Thank you. Let's go to you, Noah.
All right. Yeah, I think next year I'll be student teaching, finishing up my last year of my undergrad. So I'm kind of in the same boat as the other educators. And I think initially when school shut down, I was really stressed and worried about a lot of the students I work with in special education. And then as the George Floyd event started happening, like Lyle was saying, it was very sad and kind of scary at first, but now I feel inspired and, that more conversations like these are happening and that, like kind of what was just said, seeing a lot of other educators kind of changing their ways and adapting is also really inspiring too. So I feel like I'm definitely past kind of my low point and I'm now more optimistic and inspired than I was right at the first of it.
Thanks, Noah. How about you, Darren?
I'm both extremely sad, but also inspired. On the sad part, at the beginning of COVID, I lost a bunch of family members, not necessarily through COVID, a lot through gun violence, which is, again, a systematic thing that we're dealing with as a result of systematic racism. But on the other end, being consistently inspired by folks who are out here doing the work that I'm out here with, especially like my young people. If y'all, saw anything about the Shorewood incident with the young man who was spit on, he was one of my students, and he's even in the space here at my office right now, doing some organizing work with our students to hold, especially some elected officials accountable to what needs to be changed in our community. So I'm consistently inspired by, our generation and those younger than us.
very inspirational. He handled himself very well in that situation. So he has some good mentors and a level head of his own. So give him our love and support. Solana, you're last. How about you? Let's let us know how you're doing.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I mean, as good as you can be. So nothing really to complain about. I want to echo what Darren said about just like being extremely sad and like constantly emotional with the state of things going on right now. But constantly inspired by the organization I work with, the people I'm in community with, constantly holding folks accountable a lot more, like it was mentioned earlier. Yeah, I mean, you see things on like Twitter and Instagram, like I faced a pandemic before I had my first relationship, and like there's this sense of responsibility to like keep everyone safe while simultaneously being young, and like it's yeah, a lot. So I'll echo what everyone else said.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot. I think the reason why we wanted to have this conversation today is because there's a lot of people are noticing your generation and how vocal and active you've been during this time, both of COVID and the discussions around racial equity. I'm going to share my screen again because I found some interesting stats. I want to get your take on this and see if this, statistics are one thing, but just kind of wondering if this plays out for you in real life too. So just to level set for everybody listening, the generations defined, you can kind of find yourself in this generation or these peer groups here. So we're talking to Generation Z today. The bulk of FUEL members are in the millennial generation, and we also have a good number of Generation X. We have boomers that come to events, and not as much of the greatest generation, but all of us have probably friends and family members in all of these generations. But this is just to kind of give you a distinction. And again, depending on the school of thought and who the researcher is, this is often, it changes a little bit, give or take a year here. What is interesting about Generation Z is that you're the most diverse in terms of ethnicity. So about 50% of your generation is white, and then you can see the breakdown in the chart. So for perspective, for millennials, 56% of millennials are white, 60% of Gen Xers are white, 74% of boomers are white, and even more in the silent generation. So it's a very different mix of people that would probably lend itself, and well, the studies and polling shows that it lends itself to different ways of thinking and acceptance rates of different things, tolerances. The chart that I'm showing here was done by the Pew Research Center, and they wanted to find out what generations think diversity is good for society in general. For my generation, which is very close to Gen Z, I would think that this would be 100% answer that it's good for our society. But the truth is that's not the way everybody sees the world, which is evident in some of the challenges that we face. But it's interesting to see how that changes as the generations get younger. Of the more conservative, people might think, oh, well, maybe these are some of the more liberal, even amongst the more conservative people, which is what the Pew Research Center was trying to tease out with this chart. Even among the more Republican Gen Zers, their rates of openness to the ideas that there is, racial inequity and racism in the world, they have even higher rates than the millennials of believing that this is true and obviously having seen it. So in our world today, social media is huge, right? Especially for Generation Z. I want to ask you guys, what do you think the role of social media and just your connectedness across lines? You don't physically have to be in the space together. We saw that with this video of George Floyd being murdered, a video that I think a lot of people saw because people were at home quarantined, and some of the older generations maybe would not have been paying as much attention as they're not as digitally connected as your generation are. But you guys have been seeing all of these videos all along. What do you think the role has been in social media and just that connectiveness of the internet in raising people's awareness of the issues around race or racism, whether it's your generation or somebody else's? Actually, anybody, I'll leave that open and let you guys decide who wants to touch on that.
I can, I was just talking to someone about this morning, and I think obviously the role of social media, it's been, mostly for the positive, right? A lot of this stuff comes to light. We've been able to see a lot of this stuff happening. But at the same time, social media tends to point out like really focused incidents of hatred and racism, right? Like the George Floyd event was like, it was terrible, and it was evident that it was terrible, but social media doesn't necessarily do a good job at pointing out like the people who say they support Black Lives Matters or a movement, but they're still, supporting racism through their work or their community. I think we have to be careful with social media is that although it's helping, it doesn't show us the whole picture. And so that's why I think like, our generation and all the people on this panel are working hard within our communities to not only use social media, but also kind of to see what the root of the issue is as well.
Yeah. Ooh, sorry.
Julia, go ahead. I thought you were.
Yeah, I'm just gonna jump in. No, on top of that, I feel like social media is just an amazing vehicle for making sure that the message continues to be circulated and continues to stay on the main stage. I see it as a huge problem that this was really a trend, but just in the same vein, we have the opportunity to make sure that this does stay, I'm not going to say on trend, because once again, this is not a trend, but to stay, on the front face. But at the same time, there is so much misinformation, and everybody is very, maybe triggered is not the word, but everybody is a little bit on edge. And I feel like we need to be really careful with social media and how we spread this information, because we need to move forward correctly, and we need to come correct. So.
Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Lyle.
Yeah, I was gonna say that echoing a lot of the stuff that you guys say about how social media is good. One danger that I've sort of also seen with it is that just from my looking around, it feels like it can it fosters an environment where people become very polarized. I've even noticed this like just on Instagram, for example. I follow the Black Lives Matter hashtag, and sometimes people who are anti-black post within that hashtag, and in trying to make sense with that, I've gone to some of those pages or looked into those comment sections, and for as much good work as I feel like there's being done, there's also an extreme uproar on the other side that I think social media is allowing to become energized the same way that it's becoming, or it's allowing anti-racism to become energized. And I think that's something that I'm trying to figure out, like how do we confront that, because I see that as a really big problem of of people being really hesitant to try to become anti-racist. I don't know. Yeah, maybe some of you guys have seen that as well, but.
Yeah, I'll open that question up to the panel and also to the chat. So all the participants listening, you just saw the stats and distinction between Generation Z and others. Are you noticing in your own lives that the younger generation or young people in your life tend to be more vocal against anti-racism, or anti-racist, or vocal in speaking out against racism? Are they more likely to support the Black Lives Matter movement and other movements that promote racial equality? Are you seeing that in your own life? And if you are, please put that in the chat so we can see your experiences. But to Lyle's point, I'm wondering, are you noticing from your own generation anti-racist sentiment? Because all of the indicators are saying that your generation is sort of moving away from that. But when I talk to folks individually, it seems like there's some nuances that are being that are being missed there? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, run that question back, Corey.
Yeah, what are you seeing in your generation? So young folks, the idea is that, Generation Z is going to lead the movement in, erasing racism, which it seems like numbers wise that would make sense in the long term. But as I'm talking to people individually, I'm wondering how much racism are you seeing amongst your own generation?
Yeah, so I think that when we have this conversation, we have to acknowledge the evolution of racism, right? In the different forms that it takes. Like we're like folks were saying in the previous question, that social media is a double-edged sword. One, it gives folks the ability to mobilize, be well informed about things. It's also some misinformed a little bit. But on the other end, you have this exponential growth of oppressors, right? And of oppression, and it takes different forms. In the form of, again, even like people cyber hacking these Zooms, right? And that being literally an FBI investigation. People are doing on the other side of the fight are evolving in their tactics, and then also functioning under the disguise of being allies too, right? So folks will learn the language, but they won't follow up with the action to be true liberators in the cause. So I would say we're in a space where we're still dealing with similar issues that folks dealt with even in the civil rights movement, but in a different form, right? In the workplace, in our schools, in our social spaces still, right? It's just under the disguise of even Midwest hospitality, right? So yeah, we still have a lot of work to do, and I don't think that we will be the generation to end it all, and that's a big mantle to put on our backs, but we will do our work to dismantle the system as far as we can, and we'll do it unapologetically.
For
the educators in the group, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Oh, sorry, Michaela.
Go ahead, Rithi.
Thank you. I completely want to echo everything that Darren just said. That's something that I've been thinking about. Also, I noticed in the chat, someone named Angela Rester, I think, said something about how social media can be an echo chamber for just your views and people that think very similar to you. I think that's something that I've come across a lot. I'll unfollow people and block people that I do notice are being or being racist, microaggressions, all that kind of good stuff, or terrible stuff. I do think also one thing to think about with social media is how people are kind of using it as a way to trend, as a way to gain clout and just kind of push forward that white savior complex that we see so often, just even in film. And I think it also social media is just a wonderful tool to gain access to different resources, different ways of reflection, and even calling yourself out on your past mistakes. But at the same time, like Darren said, it's taking all of those things that you're learning, all of those things you're posting, those black squares on Instagram, and really copying and pasting that into your personal life, whether it's those uncomfortable situations at Thanksgiving with your family, with that elderly teacher at your MPS school that teaches primarily Black children, or even just your friends that are saying certain things not necessarily against Black lives, but even just lives in general that are racially charged. I think it is really just, okay, these aren't two separate things like social media and my life, and it's not just something to put on your page just to be okay, I'm safe now. but it's really moving forward and being uncomfortable, even when it sucks and your heart rate is going and all that stuff. So yeah.
Michaela, go ahead.
Yeah, I really just wanted to say that I think that what Darren had said specifically towards the end of what he was saying was really, really impactful. That like, I really don't think that racism is going to end within our generation alone. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that what we see a lot right now is that we have these labels, ally, anti-racist, and like, well, these are great labels to give yourself and want to be. Also understanding that how we view racism and how we overcome our racism and implicit bias is a progression, and it's a matter of working on that continuously. So you don't just label yourself an ally and be done with it. You know, you're continuously educating yourself and having those conversations like Rithi and I think Darren and others were saying. And I've gotten to the point where I personally don't even use social media anymore. I have a LinkedIn just because I think, you know, I'm a young professional and that's what I want to have now. But it got to the point that it's like social media, while it can be a vehicle for change and community organizing, it's also become something that blankets what the cause and what the discussion should really be about with these trends and tweets and labels. And so I think that what we're really seeing is that there might be hesitancy towards people in our generation to come to terms with calling themselves a ally or anti-racist, just because they don't completely understand that it's not something that happens overnight. You work towards it.
Do you feel like there's a willingness of the people that you're around? Like, are people generally interested in learning about issues of race and how to be anti-racist? And are they willing to actively sort of jump into classes or conversations, webinars? Is there a willingness there? How about you, Madeline?
Yes. So I'd say from our generation and stuff, you definitely see the willingness of people to learn and want to ask questions and be told when they're wrong. I'd say for the most of us, because I'd say from our generation, like, I think a lot of people are willing to learn, but are afraid of saying something wrong, of accidentally saying the wrong thing, like offending people, so that they just don't want to speak at all. And I think that that's where not a lot of growth can happen, because I think, like, even if you're afraid to learn, if you're afraid to be open to criticism, how else would you grow if you didn't have those conversations with other people? I think our generation, like, definitely wants to learn, but it's hard to know what questions to ask, but there are resources out there for people. It's just a matter of, like, making sure you're locating them and you know, not being afraid to admit when you're wrong and when you make mistakes, and listen to people when they tell you that you've said something wrong or done something wrong, and grow from it. So I think mindset of most of us, I think.
That's really good. Solana, I'm curious about what your experience has been with that, because you sort of work in this world of organizing and civic action, and you would think that most people would be on board with being corrected or wanting to learn or being open-minded. But in my experience, that's not always the case. Even though somebody sort of lives in that world, they're not always the most open-minded. What have you been seeing?
Right. I feel like, especially before, so I'm recently a public ally alum. I did 2 years. So before public allies, before I kind of got introduced to this world of, like, community and having people that actively want to learn and, like, be taught, I was really in a world of, like, everyone around me didn't care and, like, didn't want to care, and they were all my age. So I know that world exists and it's here. And the organization I work with, we work with students in MPS schools and public colleges, and just community members that are young. And obviously the people that are attracted to us want to learn more, but definitely in, like, workshops I've had to facilitate, there's been, like, a disconnect where, like, somebody doesn't understand something and feels like their identity is being paired against another and there's no common ground. That happens a lot too. So yeah, I guess there's a willingness to learn, there's also a willingness to just like, I'm a person and I'm doing whatever I want and don't care about anybody else. That's a thing too. So I guess I don't really have an answer for you. I see both worlds, and a lot of people want to learn. So yeah, let's just hope there's more people like that than anything else. I hope that answered your question.
One question I want to ask you, and this has come up a couple of times in some of the meetings that I've been in with at MMAC and our board members, which are largely male, older, white CEOs and business leaders. And there's been a couple of them that have said that their own kids have like called them out or been sending them 4-page emails like, you need to do more. Are you seeing, and any of you can respond to that in your own lives or your friend network? Are people in your generation, are you seeing folks like calling out their parents, family members, colleagues when they see something that's not right?
Yeah, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
I should have probably said this like way more heavy on this, because Gen Z, like high school kids specifically, like there's just something about them that don't care. Like they don't care about people's feelings sometimes, which is fine. Like sometimes you just can't care about feelings. They don't care how they're coming across. Like they have like, yeah, they don't care. They say whatever they feel and what they know to be true and like put it out there for people to see. I've seen that a lot more with that generation than any others, especially like, not that I'm any different from Gen Z because I'm obviously a Gen Zer, but I do have friends that are a lot older than me. A lot of my friends are millennials, and they were never the type of generation to just say things. They're kind of more like manners, but like also let's fight the power. So it's definitely different. So
Yeah, can I jump in? Yeah, I think that like Solana is 100% on point. Like, Generation Z folks who are in their 20s, they are definitely like calling folks out, but definitely these high schoolers are on a whole nother level where they're super unapologetic. I mean, like literally just yesterday in our space, my young people had to have a real conversation with a white facilitator about how problematic his facilitation style was and how dismissive he was to them, right? And he couldn't receive that, and it was like, look, man, like this is our space, and we welcomed you here, right? Because we wanted what you had to offer. But if you're not going to receive our criticism, you can leave. And like he had to take that, and I interjected because he tried to like, elevate his voice a little bit and be like, try and push back a little bit. And I have to be like, yo, like you need to back up off my students. But I think there's something really unapologetic about this moment now in history that's really gonna rattle system structures. And I think people need to lean into it. I think a lot, especially if we look at like what's happening on the ground here locally, even calling out older organizers is what young folks are doing right now, right? Because clearly there is a, in the organizing space, older organizers are telling young people like, you should do it this way, you should come up with a plan this way. And they've been doing that for years, and that's gotten some victories, but it's not looking like the victories that this generation wants, right? We're hungry for radical change, and we don't want to wait 20 plus years to see that happen. We want this tomorrow, right? So, man, folks are doing it. They're calling out their parents, their teachers, everybody and their mama and their grandmama, like, and we're especially in a space where especially young women of color are really calling out men of color. I think that this space is becoming more amplified and more apparent, because especially as we look at the national level of what organizing looks like, the movement's being led by Black queer women, and they're holding it down. And if we're not following suit, we'll just fall behind. And I love this. I love how we are just really holding Black men and brown men and everybody accountable. And I've been called out myself, and I love it because I need to.
Yep, holding everybody accountable. I've been called out too, and it's this time period now where it's like it's time out for that thin skin thing, right? Like, how do you move forward if you're so fragile, nobody can say anything to you? Julia, what are you seeing in the world of call outs?
Oh yes, it's great that you said you've been called out yourself, because as I've done my fair share of calling out, I've also had to step back and like look at my trajectory, make sure I'm calling myself out, and also I've had the space for people to call me out as well. And I have so many Black people around me, and we are all of the thought that change needs to happen. Unity, we need to push forward, we need to make radical change. But while that is the group thought, there is some tension between what groups do we need to focus on more, who this movement is really about. And I think just one thing that I've been really cautious about is making sure that we are including all Black groups, all groups of color in this push. Because yes, while this but while this was really arisen from an issue with a Black man, all Black lives do matter. And, that definitely gets a little, it tends to be forgotten at times, or it tends to be pushed off to the side. But like, we as a people need to acknowledge each other and push forward.
So I want to ask this question about, I've been getting a couple of emails from folks about what Nick Cannon said on his radio show. I'm going to just go there because it's on my mind. I didn't hear his podcast, but what I've heard was that he said some comments that were anti-Semitic. And the reason why I bring that up is because I've also wondered about the sort of this backlash against, for those who don't know, there's a history between Jewish people and Black folks. So there's some history between them, just like Black folks and white folks. And the parallel that I'm drawing is about, I wanted to bring up the whole movement of, well, not movement, but the reaction to racism, where folks are calling people Karens or Bretts, and just what your reaction might be to that. Because my feeling is, this is me, as I'm on the cusp between X and millennial. This is me, okay? So just take it like your mom said, you don't have to listen to me. But I feel like I've never seen a moment like this where people are so open to talking about race and racism. The fact that with FUEL, I could run this series of conversations for as long as I have had, and had the amount of interest stay high. I've never seen it before. And I kind of went into this like, yes, we're gonna end racism and there'll be equality for all. And I just didn't anticipate some of the side effects of racism showing up in the way that they have. I understand some of the backlash. I understand why somebody might get mad and label a video, swimming pool Karens, or, I get that anger and that pain, and I get the response. I get it. But I don't think I anticipated the amount of, I don't know, I guess I'll just refer to it as side effects of having been oppressed, and the fact that that would cause pain for people. And then the response to that pain is like, well, we've been going through this for years and you can't take, I just don't know how I don't know how to respond to that. And I'm wondering how you guys are feeling about that. I know that's kind of a heavy thing to put out there, but I'm still wrestling with it. And I'm wondering what you all think.
Are we talking about white guilt? Just for clarity.
No, I don't think it's no, because I don't know. I haven't talked to any white people about this. I think I don't know. Like I remember when the first couple, like I remember Becky with the good hair and Karen, these Karens out here is, I remember hearing it the first couple times when it would be directed at a person. And now I feel like it's becoming a broader thing where anytime we get mad at a white lady, we're going to call her a Karen. And I don't know if that's about white guilt or white sensitivity or white for.
I mean, it's both.
Yeah.
I think I don't want to.
No, listen. What I asked this because I really, whatever you think, I want you to say it because I probably would get the most candid answers from you guys. So whatever you think, I want you to say it.
Say less. So a lot of folks, especially if you view all of these situations, right, where you have folks labeling, folks Karens, Beckys, Susans, Bretts, Brads, whatever. You have, and I was just talking about it with my students this morning, is you always hit this moment in response with these folks where they end up crying, right? And it's like, why are you doing this to me, right? When if you look at the like A to B of this situation, it started because of them, right? And consistently you have especially Black folks having to deal with white guilt and white tears and be like, oh, and reacting in a way that's like, oh, I'm sorry that you're hurt, right? And like moving towards comfort, or being like, we don't have to have this conversation because you're too uncomfortable, right? We need to shift gears and like for real be at a point where folks can be comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's where the real work begins, and that's where systematic changes happen. I spent time watching the situation where the white lady pulled out a gun on the mother and the daughter outside of the Chipotle, right? And she just released a video about sometime last week where, she's talking about, if in this moment when I pulled out my gun and I cocked it, I was about to die. She was saying that she was about to die, but she had the weapon in her hand. And then she cried in that moment. And it reminded me of every moment where white folks end up crying in response to issues that they created. And the concurrent, like the consistent, space where folks are calling this out and calling it for what it is where we are now. And people need to just accept that.
Got it.
If I could verbally digest your question. So what I heard you kind of ask was like, in this moment, Gen Z especially, and young people are making racism and being anti-racist at the forefront, and people are getting fired. People obviously are getting fired. Things like that, like white folks who have done wrong things, people who have done wrong things, said wrong things that have power. The harshness of that is getting them fired and ruining lives. Whereas the older generation is like, this was happening a while ago and we didn't make anyone get fired. We just took it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I guess what I'm saying is there's a distinction between racial prejudice and racism, and that Black folks don't necessarily have the power to do anything other than hurt a white person's feelings. We're not necessarily outside of this movement going to get them fired, or we don't control the jobs or the economic. I get that. But I guess my concern is that when we start normalizing racial prejudice against, I think about the panelists here that identify as white. Okay. When we start normalizing or processing our anger and our pain and the injustice by doing it back to the extent that we can, that's the thing that I'm getting concerned about. without caping for the oppressors, because I got panelists here who want to come and talk about this that could easily be called a Karen just because their parents are white. You know what I'm saying? I feel like it's going past calling the individual person out for what they're doing and turning into, now this is going to be a part of the culture. And the reason why why I'm concerned about it is because with each generation, we're going to get more and more brown. And at some point, the power is going to shift. So then what is it going to look like when more brown people have power? You know what I'm saying? I feel like you guys are the generation that can say we either are going to do this and be anti-racist, or we're going to be, it's popular to call names of some groups or not other groups. I don't 100% know how I understand the sentiment. I'm concerned about the mass movement of normalizing calling people out or treating people a certain way or assigning a name to people because of their race when they haven't necessarily done that particular action. And I'm just wanting to get your reactions to it. Go ahead, Noah.
Your first point, we started this conversation about the Nick Cannon thing and his anti-Semitic comments, and it's very similar to the I don't know if you saw I think his name is Deshaun Jackson, his anti-Semitic comments as well. And I think the word for it is cancel culture, right? And I think what I'm hearing is that like we've all agreed on this panel that if someone says something that maybe isn't right or they just don't fully understand, like they're allowed to be educated, right? Like we're allowed to like open the door open and say like, come in, we will educate you. And I don't think that, I don't really agree with cancel culture a lot of the time because I feel like it's the opposite of that, right? It's the opposite of letting people have this opportunity to learn and to grow, unless the event is absolutely horrific and terrible. And being raised Jewish and kind of watching the the Deshaun Jackson thing happening, it was really enlightening to see like other Jewish football players saying, hey, I'll take you to the Holocaust Museum, or I'll take, we'll go visit this, I'll educate you on this. And instead of being like, hey, you're canceled, like we're not going to talk to you again, it was like, we're going to use this like really crappy thing you did as an opportunity to help educate. So that's kind of how I feel about it. And then especially being a white man, that's kind of the role I'm in, is like, how can I learn? How can I grow from the people around me, the community around me? And so if I'm doing that myself, I shouldn't be not letting other people do it as well.
I'm muted. Sorry, I'm still talking on mute. In your personal friend groups, and you can nod if you don't want to unmute yourself, do you feel like you have a pretty diverse group of friends? Yeah. Those who don't, nod this way. Has the diversity in your friend group impacted the way that, or had any effect on the way that you feel like you move through the world because of being close? Rithi, go ahead. I see you nodding.
Yes, absolutely. I think I grew up in a very like white heavy suburb in Minnesota. And I went to kindergarten to like 3rd grade in Minneapolis. So that difference even between like very diverse, like open to conversation, asking questions that are really rooted in like just genuine curiosity really shifted when I went to high school. And then coming and moving to Milwaukee and then getting this, like creating a new group of friends that is very diverse. I think it really allowed me to open up more conversations where it was more in curiosity. I think like on top of that, we are so diverse in my friend group. I'm Indian and Ethiopian, and both of those sides, I think when I was growing up, were really muted by the people that I went to high school with. I really found myself really forcing this beauty standard that I just did not possess, and really focusing on the hierarchy, especially in between women and women of color. And it really just pushed me forward into embracing my culture and kind of asking those questions and celebrating my friends in a way that they feel comfortable, or I hope they are able to feel comfortable celebrating that themselves. One of my best friends, like Clayton, he like actively asks me questions about my Indian heritage and just what that means. And even so much to like push me to like do I was asked by a photographer to like be captured in like my mom's clothing. So that was really important for me. And my parents being immigrants in 93 came to Orange County in California and was like immediately greeted by just straight up racism. Like my mom was assaulted in a grocery store and was asked she was wearing a chudidar, which is like a traditional Indian dress. And she was like, she has an accent, and she literally told me, she was like, I was scared to speak because if they heard my accent, like, I don't know if I would have been able to go home. Mm-hmm. And that's terrifying. And to be able to share that with my friends and for them to understand that, not just necessarily empathize with it from an outside perspective, I think is just a really powerful way to really be like, yes, this is how my parents grew up. These are real things that are happening to me. And I think like gaslighting is a phrase that we're hearing a lot about, but I do think that it's real. And I think those conversations within those friend groups you're able to dismantle that and really validate your own story. So, yeah.
Anybody else want to talk about their friend group and the impact it's had in your life?
Yeah, I would definitely want to jump in. So I think I had
Julia and then Lyle. Go ahead.
So I think I had a really unique experience growing up because while I have a diverse friend group here in Milwaukee, my friend group back home was even more so diverse. And I'm just talking like every color of the rainbow. But that was just more so specific to my area. And, you know, coming out to Milwaukee, coming out into the world, I realized that the world really isn't like that everywhere. And so it's been really important to me to build a group of friends who everyone's just very receptive to everyone's shared experience, everyone's specific experience. You know, if I come home and I'm ranting about my experience as a Black woman and I am mad at, you know, the collective Karen, you know, but, you know, my white roommate, she's not going to feel targeted, or she's not going to feel like I'm speaking at her because she knows that she's not, you know, thinking of that vein. She knows that she didn't do anything to offend me. She knows that that is my specific experience and that I need to be comfortable in my space to share that. So I think it's been really rewarding having a diverse group of friends, Black, white, Hispanic, and more, who just like, man, I've never experienced that, but I see how you're experiencing it and I'm here to listen. And being an ally.
Yep. Go ahead, Lyle.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I definitely feel like I just entered college a year ago. I'm going into sophomore year of college. When I was in high school, I felt like my friend group was very diverse. I went to Pius High School, so you know, and it's like it's more white than anything else, but I do feel like there's a lot of people of color that are in that community. Outside of school, I was also involved in like several different bands, like K-Stamp. We played at Free Space a lot, so I felt like I had like a ton of friends from there that were not white. And myself, I'm mixed race, Puerto Rican and white, so I have like a lot of like family members that, you know, I have a pretty diverse family reunion, honestly. And I felt like when I went to college, I entered a program specifically at NYU that was jazz studies, which for being a Black invented genre of music, if you looked at the racial demographics of the program, it's very, very white. And I don't totally felt how now that I had to kind of start over with a new friend group in a new city, that my friend group became less diverse. And it was something that in the moment I wasn't super conscious of, I think, but it just felt different. And I think that after coming back to Milwaukee, I sort of, I don't know, I feel like sometimes I bring experiences from growing up in a very integrated environment, from birth all the way up into college, that some of my friends now in college didn't experience, and I think that's really enlightening. And I think that, to call myself out, I have to probably do a little bit more work to share some of my experiences with my white friends in college who have very different upbringings than I did, and just, they're my friends, they can talk to me. I'm not gonna hurt their feelings or anything. It's okay. So
Thank you for that. We have some questions in the chat. So we're right at 3 o'clock here. So for those who have to hop off, I see some of the attendees have to hop off, and any of the panelists, if you need to hop off. If you can stay for some questions, then we have Marjorie Yoshida, one of my colleagues here at MMAC, who's been in the chat. Marjorie, do you have any questions from the chat that we should address with the panel?
Yeah, there's one in particular. What are your thoughts? Should colleges and universities design mandatory diversity, equity, inclusion programs for all faculty, students, staff, senior leadership, and trustees?
No. Oh,
Michaela, go for it.
sorry. Thank you. I didn't. I typed in a little response when I saw that question pop up. So I'll just go ahead and say something really quick because I think that's very important. Personally, I think that it should be mandatory, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I think that it should definitely be mandatory for students, staff, anyone going to colleges and universities. Personally speaking, as the first generation college student, it was very hard for me to feel comfortable in a space that felt like it's predominantly still a middle to upper class white experience. And I felt that I had to navigate things on my own, and I didn't feel quite as comfortable when I stepped into my college campus.
Rithy?
Yeah, I think that one thing that is fairly prevalent in college campuses, I think, is like there's always like Instagram and like Twitter posts about it, but like I always got emails when I was in college like, oh, like, do you want to come and like get your picture taken to be at the front of your like this like what was it called, pamphlet or like whatever. And I remember the first time I got that email, I was like, I'm about to model, like I'm so excited. And then I got there and I was just in a room with I went to a very small college. My graduating class was 60 people. And in my class, I was like one of maybe 10 people of color. And all of those 10 people were just in a room with me. And I was like, this is just not accurate, and I brought that issue up to my chancellor, again, because I had a very small campus. I was able to do that. And I went to school for health sciences, and the people that are at that school are like very interested in going into the medical field. And the people that you're serving when you are in the medical field are very diverse, of different spiritualities, ethnicities, races, everything. And to not have your provider look like you is a very difficult thing. And more than that, to not have your provider understand and really be respectful of that is even more important. And so what we ended up doing was making a living learning community on campus, where we brought in 50 first generation students. All of them were people of color, and provided them not only with a 4-year scholarship after like rigorous interviews, but also just resources on campus. Because I think one thing for campuses to know is that it's not as important to reach a quota as it is to really support those students in their journey through college. We received a lot of backlash with that on the college campus, especially because what my college did at first was force the people who were first generation people of color to take all of these DEI courses as opposed to the greater like white population. And that eventually did change, and it really did impact the way that students and teachers really interacted with each other. So I think like absolutely that's the most important thing to do. I think alongside that, what's also important is to provide those resources and provide counselors who are really experts on what it means to be a first generation student and a person of color at going to school and being able to complete that with a lot of just accomplishments in that way. So not really, yeah, if that makes sense, like less boundaries for what that means. But.
Perfect. Michaela?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, did you want to respond to the question about whether or not it should be mandated for colleges to have their instructors go through D&I training?
Oh yeah, I gave my response. I think that it is necessary. Yeah.
Marjorie, are you seeing any other questions?
Not really. There was one. Do you think Gen Z in rural areas are on the same page as you? Could this be a barrier?
Could it be a barrier?
I don't necessarily work in the suburbs or rural areas. But I do know, and I think it was Julia who brought this up to begin with, about like the Black Lives Matter movement and just uprisings that we're seeing being like a trend. So I am seeing a lot more of like white suburban young people like being like, oh, Black Lives Matter, like, you know, like it's a trend, which unfortunately is kind of the notion. But when I see that, it's like, to me, I'm like performative, but also they're learning or like trying to, and I'm like, that's cool, but like also you're just kind of saying it so you don't get hate on. I don't know. Yeah. It's definitely probably becoming more of a thing in the suburbs and rural areas, but do we know if it's genuine? Do we know if they're actually learning the right things? Yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Can
Oh, go ahead, Darren. Go ahead.
Awesome. And I've done some work with rural communities, especially through like 4-H, which is predominantly in rural communities, right? You know, a lot of those folks are folks who come from communities where their parents are farmers, they're blue collar workers, and they're used to living in small towns with maybe, you know, 2 to 4 Black and brown folks living in their community that look like them. But they're over the past few years, and being in those spaces, I've seen them be more intentional about at least learning, right? They're you know, a lot of folks are messing up consistently and being able to support their small populace of people of color, but they're trying to learn, and they're inviting folks in that are from major metropolitan areas to be able to help them unlearn. But the piece that Solana was talking about is real. There is a parade culture as it relates to especially folks getting out in these streets and fighting for Black lives, and also fighting to dismantle other systems of oppression. But there are folks who are also genuine and are trying to learn. And there is a difference in what the fight looks like in rural communities versus what it looks like in metropolitan communities. And those efforts have to look different too, and how we respond to supporting movement work in rural communities has to look different.
Mm-hmm. So as we wrap up here, we still have some attendees listening, and we'll have there was about 300 people that registered for this conversation that either came live or wanted to get the playback. So they'll hear any advice or suggestions that you have for them. At this time, I want you guys to give a nudge, because what I'm hearing a lot from my generation and the one ahead of me is, what can I do? How can I make a difference? I'm sure you guys are hearing that a lot too, but by all accounts, your generation is just kind of getting out there and either using their social media platforms or actively working to make change. What advice do you have for people who are wondering what they can do? Just whether it's an advice or encouragement, suggestions of things that folks can do to start making a difference. I'm gonna start with Julia, and then we'll go around.
Can I add one thing to that question real quick?
Marjorie, yep, go ahead.
Put up in the chat. As part of that question, what tips are there for talking to parents as a Gen Zer?
Say it again, Marjorie.
Tips for talking to parents as a Gen Zer.
As a Gen Zer, okay.
Okay, well, let's see. I'll tackle both of them. First, I'd say that the biggest thing for me is just making sure that what is happening is actually being understood. Because as much as we can, protest, say Black Lives Matter, and get on our soapboxes about what's happening, if we're trying to change someone's thought, they're really not going to understand unless we really speak to them from a level place, or some type of playing field where really there's compassion for their side of things, compassion from where they could be coming from, and also where things are just demonstrated in a way where they can be received, because everyone's just hearing so much information, and as we are circulating in our own bubbles, it's really easy to just believe what you believe and not see it any other way. So that would be what I would say. Just try and actually have an open conversation with somebody whose mind you see needs to be changed. And I would further that to parents, when I'm having conversations with my own parents, and they're, of course they're of the movement, but there are still some things that they don't understand. And I have had to, just sit down, with my dad and just been like, just hash things out. They ask questions, and, as ignorant or as uncomfortable as it may you, as much as you may understand it, that's not always the case for everyone. So I feel like just having that level-headed compassion to actually explain what's going on, we could definitely find a place to move forward from.
Go ahead, Lyle.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to put this one out there too, because I don't do the best job of this. Sometimes a lot of times when I talk to my parents about this, it's like I do a lot of the talking, honestly. I spend my days like researching, reading, or watching stuff, and and sharing stuff, and I have all these ideas in my head, and it just kind of that comes out at once. I think I just wrote this down. I want to challenge my parents or family members to do their own research, or to maybe have me talking to them be more of like hey, here's this cool documentary I watched about about the dangers of white nationalism with white youth, and how they can be vulnerable to falling into that. Would you want to watch that with me, or do you want to watch that on your own time, or just anything like that, to make them feel, because they're smart people, they can make choices for themselves, and I think that they can do the research if I can, So.
That's right. Maddie, you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, sure. So going off of that, kind of like what he was saying about like him feeling like he needs to educate his parents, like there's asking questions, but then there's also like doing your own research. And I think there needs to be a balance between the resources are out there for us, especially like as a white person, there are enough resources out there for me to take the responsibility to learn on my own, rather than ask like somebody of color to explain their experiences to me. Like it's not like I'm open here to listen, but I think there's a certain line between like asking for help, but also understanding that it's not their job to explain to you what they've been through, when there are resources that you can obtain yourself. So that's just kind of going off of like what he said. But then in terms of like what I kind of think like my biggest advice would be to people in general is like something I've seen with I guess maybe not so much our generation, but like the older generations and with people with big platforms, is that a lot of people are quick to label this as a political issue, and it's not. And I think by labeling it a political issue, it's allowing a lot of people with big brands and with big platforms to stay silent because they want to stay politically neutral, when it's like, that's not what this is. This is a human rights issue. This isn't something that you can stay silent about. Yeah, so I'd say like calling out places that are seeing this as like oh, it's politics, I don't want to get into it, and like, you know, having those conversations with your family, like when you try to stay, or like if you have family members who want to try to stay politically neutral, just being like, well, this isn't politics, this is human rights. They're two separate things. Like, we need to have these conversations because it's lives that we're talking about here. It shouldn't be a political statement that Black Lives Matter. And people shouldn't be ashamed to say that because they're afraid of losing business or something like that. But yeah, so my biggest advice would just be to like speak out and don't see this as a political issue when it's not and shouldn't be.
Anybody else want to chime in there? Ruthie? Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of family members, despite being people of color, who do have a lot of prejudice and just aren't educated very well on subjects. And in my family, it's not always just like let's just have like a nice conversation. It's very like charged and tension is high and it's not mature at all. So I think for me, when I'm in those situations, which I am a lot, I think the best thing for me to do is also make sure you're taking care of yourself. So I would say like, take a deep breath, like before you start the conversation, like in through your nose, out through your mouth. That's my like kindergarten teacher coming out. But I would say that really trying to put it in frame of a story, like a narrative. Like for me, I had 53 students my first year teaching, and this past year I had 32. And all of them are students of color. And I know that 82% of those Black students are going to experience gun violence before the time they turn 18. And even just putting that in perspective for my family, where it's like, I'm teaching these students, these are, imagine if your 4-year-old child had that same statistic put onto them, you know, and really just kind of forcing empathy to occur. I think is the best way to talk to people who aren't educated on statistics and these like YouTube videos and TED Talks and all this stuff. Because at the end of the day, that humanizing those issues and really putting it on that level of like, these are real things that can hurt and just cause a lot of pain for people. And it's all based off of the color of someone's skin. I think that that's something that's been helpful, and it isn't always done like perfectly to a T, but it has caused more conversations and questions to happen. So yeah.
That's great. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think that my advice for especially parents is your young folks are looking for a transparent conversation about the trauma that your family has endured. Before we can talk about liberation of folks, we have to liberate our families from the mental trauma that we've dealt with. And too often we don't have real transparent conversations, especially with our children, about the things that we've experienced, because we don't think that they're ready. So that needs to occur. And then on the other end, unlearning ageism is critical. Young people are oppressed by their parents in so many ways, and other adults in their lives in so many ways. So, you know, do the research y'all need to do to unlearn about ageism before any kind of other conversation about you know, mending relationships or, you know, furthering the movement work occurs. For other older generations to get engaged, I think that especially young folks need healing spaces. And, you know, if you have that experience, being able to provide that for them, or wisdom in a way that's not condescending, is critical, especially in a moment like now, where folks are consistently mentally strained, not only from being out here every day organizing, to being inside for months from COVID, to all the L's they had to take because of COVID, and other things over their lifetime. Folks need support, especially when it comes to their mental health, their spiritual well-being, and their physical well-being. And we'd love to lean on older generations for that.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you guys so much. You are a beautiful panel. Your spirits are so bright, and I am so excited to see what the world is going to look like with you and people like you leading the way, as you soon will be. Thank you all for being a part of this panel and taking the time. You came highly recommended by your network of friends and supporters, and I'm not disappointed at all. I'm so grateful. At this point in the conversation is usually when I encourage the attendees that are remaining to go into the chat and leave some love notes for our panelists. Show them some love, tell them how much you appreciate their contribution to this conversation. All of you are active and have done things that I didn't even have time to mention on this conversation, but I'm gonna show a little video while folks are going in the chat showing you some love that is sort of an ode to you and your generation and the work that you all are doing to make our world a better place. I'm gonna just play a little bit of this. If you wanna see the rest of it, put the link in the chat. People always ask me, what was that video? This one is kind of long, so I won't play all of it, but I did wanna share just a little bit of it. Go into that chat and share those love notes. And also if you have any recommendations for me or ideas for other topics or speakers, please go ahead and put that in the chat at this time now too.
America's youngest labeled generation, known as Gen Z, those born in the late 1990s and early 2000s, enters adulthood as the nation grapples with systemic inequities in our institutions, from policing to health care. The NewsHour's Student Reporting Labs, our journalism program for high school students, spoke to teens across the country about how they see this moment.
A lot of times you hear people say, oh, all lives matter, when they try to counter the Black Lives Matter movement. So my question for the people who say this, when will there be equal opportunity in America for all races?
How are we as a country going to eradicate this issue of racism when it has been so deeply rooted in our government, our society, and the history of America? What is our next step?
When are we going to see and address health disparities in education? We currently live in a country that is embedded in institutionalized racism for over 400 years. The time is now to create change.
I just wonder, why aren't people more compassionate? Why aren't people doing more? You know, we're all Americans, we're all people, so why should I have to be treated less than?
I don't want to grow up to have kids and have them being scared because of their skin color.
It feels like there are so many people right now who just don't really bother trying, or who don't understand at all. And obviously a white person never truly understand that, but how do you get them to just recognize that life is different for Black people than white people in this country? Because that seems like something that so many people are in denial of.
I've donated, I've signed petitions, I've been posting on my social media, but I'm wondering what else there is that I can do to support the social justice movement, because I feel like I need to do more and I have a responsibility to take more action, but I don't know how to do that.
With all the people who are screaming out for change, will there be a change? I hope to God there is a change.
To build safer and stronger communities, it's going to take everyone to combat racism in America. You have to have conversations with your friends, your family, your colleagues, and it's going to be hard, but the conversations are definitely worth it.
So, as we're hearing, America's teenagers are asking tough questions. Some of them are also offering policy solutions. Stephanie Sy spoke to two young Black Lives Matter organizers about why they're protesting and their vision for change.
In the wake of the latest killings of unarmed black men by police, a new crop of young leaders is emerging. They're part of Generation Z, and with their bold calls for dismantling traditional policing and other systems, some say they hold the keys to lasting change. I'm joined now by two young organizers. 16-year-old Ta'andiwe Abdullah, co-founder of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles Youth Vanguard, and 17-year-old Jalen Thompson of O'Fallon, Missouri. Jalen was one of the lead organizers for his city's protest. Thank you both so much for being with us. Jalen, not only did you help to organize the protest in O'Fallon, Missouri, population 88,000, but I understand this was your first protest. Can you describe what that day was like for you?
For me, it was just very, very surreal, I guess is the best way to say that. This has been kind of a breaking point, seeing that we're just now graduating and leaving into the world. So it's scary to think that this could be us someday. And that's why we're so happy to see so many people coming together to kind of start having this conversation, even in places where it's not often talked about.
Jalen, there's a picture of you at that protest holding a sign that simply says, "I am human too," which is a powerful statement. But another powerful statement is that you were arm in arm with O'Fallon's police chief. Can you describe what that felt like, especially when so many consider the police to be the problem?
Well, here in O'Fallon, we definitely have a much better relationship with our police officers than in a lot of other places. And I think that's why we're working with them to kind of keep the protests safe. It's not all of the officers that are the problem, but it's the system that they operate under. They are able to do these things that they do that are sometimes inhuman, basically. And they're able to get away with a lot of it because of the way that our system works. And that's why we need to change it.
Ta'andiwe, you've been organizing and at protests in Los Angeles, which is one of the places where police have been criticized for how they've handled protests. And we've seen numerous videos of police actually being violent toward peaceful protesters and journalists and even bystanders. So I wonder how you read when a police officer is part of a march or takes a knee.
I view this as a systemic problem. I don't believe in the good cop narrative. I believe that there are good people who decide to become cops. But in choosing to do that, I feel like you are choosing to join an oppressive system.
We've heard two phrases, defund police and abolish police, become popular in recent weeks. I wonder what you think about the effectiveness of that language.
What I think that a lot of people mean when they say defund or abolish police is we need to reimagine what safety looks like. It's not like we don't want law enforcement or that we don't want security for our communities, but we need to reimagine what that looks like. Someone imagined this world that we live in today. And so I think we need to think about, really taking the time to think of something different, right?
So we got good comments there in the chat for you guys. Again, I did share that link in the chat if you want to see the rest of that video. I had to cut it off at the good part, but it's kind of a long one. Again, thank you to all of the panelists. You guys are awesome. Okay, fuelers, finish up your chats. And I will be sure to read them. Get back to work. Thanks for joining us for the overflow. Appreciate you guys. All right. See you next Thursday.